Throughout the semester, we have done a number of speeches. We have done everything from that introduction speech, the networking speech, to the celebratory speech, the informative speech, and the persuasive speech. When we're talking about work and speaking at work, what we're actually talking about is the environment, not the type of speech that we utilize, because we've already gone over those. Mark Twain said, "Actions speak louder than words, but not nearly as often." And this is absolutely true at work. We may have a project that comes due once a week or something we do once a quarter, but every day we're building relationships at work through communication. So we speak quite often in groups and out of groups at work in order to get our jobs done. What we want to take a look at is, what is a work group? What size are they? How many people? Next, speaking for our vocation, speaking at our job, and finally, networking. Speaking at work. Now, we can do an entire semester on small groups. Instead, we're just going to kind of touch on it in this class, and perhaps you should think about taking a small group communication in another semester. But in this case, when we're talking about a small group, we're talking normally 5 to 6 people. Can it be 7 or 8? Yeah. Can it be 10 or 11? Absolutely. Actually, a small group is best defined as the number of people you can functionally communicate with and work together with. Now, we're not talking about 50 to 100. No. We're talking much smaller than that, because that many people goes beyond our perception. But 11? Hey, that's how many are on a side of football during a game. And yeah, the offense and defense still manage to function as a small group. So a small group normally is 5 to 6 if you're looking for a book definition, but can be a few more, can even go up to maybe 12 or 13. Beyond that, you're starting to look at larger groups that you're going to need additional help with communicating and functioning with. Now, there are dangers when you have a small group. Some of those dangers are related to the fact that they are a group that is going to have a lot of communication going on. One of the big ones that always comes up is conflict between person A and B. That can be a problem you have. You'd have to resolve. We'll talk about that in a moment. The next one is groupthink. Well, this is how we've always done it, so that's how we're going to do it. But we're looking for different results. So when you have groupthink, sometimes originality, critical thinking falls aside. And that's something else you have to function and overcome as a small group, in this case, depending upon the roles. There are roles within groups. It can be simple roles that are the formal roles. They're the assigned ones. All right, you're from IT. You're going into a group that's working on a new project, and you have to support them with their IT needs. So your role in that group will be the IT person. Or perhaps you're from marketing, and that might be your role. Or you might be the boss, and so you'd be assigned the leader. Or you might be a person that works and your job is taking down all the notes, scheduling all the meetings, keeping the group together in a formal way. Once again, small group communication will go more in depth in this, but it's important to understand when you're communicating to the group where you fit in the formal role, because that will determine if you're supposed to be speaking, what you're supposed to be doing for the group, and how you can best contribute to the group. Next are the informal roles, the peacekeepers, the ones that keep us motivated, the devil's advocate that tells us, yeah, but what about, and keeps us critically thinking. Those informal roles will take place in the group, and that is where you'll also find your resolution for conflict within groups, as well as perhaps the source of some of those conflicts. There is a life cycle for all groups. There are multiple ways to look at this. One that I enjoy the most, and I'm going to introduce here because they'll tell you the other ones when you take a group course. But the punctuated equilibrium model says a group performs based on the amount of pressure that is applied to them, so that way an outcome is required. For this reason, when a group first forms, that early phase, phase 1, there actually is pretty much moving along, maybe making some progress, but the pressure is not there yet. This could happen over a quarter. Let's say you're working, this project is 1 quarter long, and your group has to accomplish it by the end of the quarter. Well, the first 3 or 4 weeks of the quarter, you're like, no problem. And then suddenly, the boss is asking for what results are you getting? And the time is getting shorter. And at that point, changes occur within the group to motivate it to reach the end and to reach phase 2 and conclusion. And at this point, that's when changes truly occur. So I bring it up so that way you have another perspective on a life cycle of a group where you can look at and say, oh yeah, if you look at the punctuated model, of course, we're just trucking along fine in this project because we're only 5 weeks in. And then suddenly you're 6 weeks in and you only have 3 weeks left, and suddenly pressure and everything changes. Understand that's a punctuated equilibrium model. That in order to get to the end, time is a primary mechanism and a catalyst for change within the group. Making workplace presentations. Now, this could be talking about your company, as we mentioned early on. You could be a keynote speaker where you're going to talk about a product at a conference, perhaps at another event, a gathering of people that work within your industry. It could be at the Chamber of Commerce. There are a number of areas where you could be the keynote speaker where you're coming in to talk about your company or your product to promote it, not within the company itself. Next, you move to within the company, and there are going to be training situations that come up where you have to train the new people so that way they understand their jobs. They can function at the basic level. This is a common one if you're working in HR or even a department lead where you have to train the people. This is going to be your informative speech, and it's going to be absolutely geared towards the function of the job. Proposals. This is your persuasive speech, and it might be a proposal to an outside group or an inside group. It might be to get more funding within the company for research on something that's important to you, or it might be a proposal to merge with another company. So this is going to be your persuasive speech. Reports are kind of a mixture of your persuasive and informative, because you want to be informative, but at the same time you have to be persuasive so that way they don't discontinue your department or fire you. You don't want any of that. So for that reason, reports can have a little bit of elements of both. But through the course, you should have learned how to put together a good presentation with that rough draft, that full sentence outline, and then the speaking outline, and using visual aids, etc. So you can create a very good report versus just talking at your audience, you're talking with them. Another one the book doesn't mention that I'll bring up real quick is mentoring, because you train these individuals. They're trained, now they're sent to the department. And in the department, there might be certain ways that you do things that needs them to learn from a person that's been there. Perhaps a way that they communicate, perhaps a social structure. All this can occur through mentoring, and you might end up mentoring 3 or 4 people, a small group. So these are all types of workplace presentations you may encounter. Finally, we have to look at interviewing. I'm going to take it initially at looking at as you are the interviewee, not the interviewer. Though in workplaces, you could end up in small groups doing both. The first one is the screening interview. This is the initial bring the new applicant in. If you are the interviewee, this is important that you understand the overall company. Maybe not the particulars of just your job that you're looking to hire into, but the overall environment of the company, the culture of the company. And what they're doing is they're taking a large group of applicants, 50, and they're going to whittle it down to 5. And you want to be part of that 5. So in this case, look at your networking speech, look at your persuasive speech, and look at your informative speech. How can you best put your foot forward? Perhaps it's a combination of your networking speech with a persuasive speech. So that way you can get that initial little story out there about you that perks their interest to bring you back for the next interview, which is the selection interview. That's taking those 5 down to the final person. And in this case, you really want to know about the job, and you want to look at the behavioral questions that they may be asking. And these behavioral questions could be situation and tasks. It could be an action that you've had to do. It could be results that you've created. If you look at these when you're crafting your presentation for a selection interview, then you can actually prepare your answers. And when they ask them, you have an answer. You don't have to sit there and go, oh gosh, I don't remember. I don't recall a time that I had to be in charge. I don't recall ever helping the sales department. No. You'll have your answers because you've looked at them and prepared for them. And in these cases, you could look at them as short, persuasive, or informative. Storytelling is very beneficial in this, where you allow the person or the committee that's interviewing you to take your perspective and see why you went the direction you went and how you got those results. That's very helpful. Additionally, you could be on the other side. You could be the interviewer. In that case, you're absolutely going to look at asking questions. You don't have to be persuasive. You can be informative. Our company does this, so what would you do? And you want to make sure that you not only look good to the interviewee, but to your fellow panelists, because that will be a social public speaking situation in which you're in front of and with leaders from your company. Interviewing tips for both sides. Dress professionally. And when we talk about business casual, remember, we're talking about the culture of the organization. In some areas, it's just a button-up shirt, a nice pair of slacks, and you're set. In other words, you might go somewhere else, though, and discover, oh, that's not business casual until I have a tie on, and until I have dress pants on and shine shoes. So look at dressing professionally based on the culture and the environment of the company. This means research the company. Talk to people that work at the company. Do your audience analysis. Understand the culture of the company you're interviewing with. This research will pay off and help you get that job. Know the interview setting. Is it virtual or is it in person? In person, then you can really focus on your appearance. But virtual, then suddenly you have to focus not only on your appearance, but on your surroundings. What does your surroundings look like? Are they sending the message you want? Make sure, if it's virtual, the technology is working. Because if it's not, you're going to struggle a lot. So check your software, check your hardware, make sure everything's recording and working, and you can log in and you can share screen and all those wonderful things. Now, if you're in person and you're doing such as a report or a sales presentation, know what technology you'll have available. Can you bring a PowerPoint, or will that not work there? And if it's not going to work there, what else can you use? Can you bring an old flip chart? What exactly do you need? And thank the interviewers. Even if you are the person doing the interviews, thank the person that you interviewed. They put time and effort into it. They'll appreciate it, and it might be a networking opportunity for you later. And on the reverse side, always thank the people that interviewed you. And you can do this even by sending a quick message to them, if perhaps they prefer email, or a handwritten note is a very good method to get into to connect with people. Networking. Now, networking is another situation. We've done the networking speech, so you know what you're looking at putting it together. But understand, networking occurs quite frequently in the companies. And networking could occur between departments. Yeah, you're in marketing, but you know what? No one gets along with IT. And your computers are constantly crashing and having troubles. you might need to network with some people over in IT and get them to like you in order to support you in your department. So it can be an inner networking opportunity or it can be external. As we mentioned, you might go to a chamber of commerce representing your company or local events. Remember, you can always set up a networking speech in a rapid amount of time. You can take an hour or two before you go to the event and knock out that 60 to 90 seconds of information that you want to share with people to network. And you can do that and you can specialize it for each event. Remember, it's not about closing a deal necessarily, as it is about making those connections that make your group or your company stronger. When we talked about those quick networking speeches, 60 to 90 seconds, I like going back to you have to have a well of information. Let's put a picture to that well. What that well is depths of knowledge you have on your topic. So if you can only remember the basics of the topic, if you're asked questions, you're going to struggle. You're not going to have much information. There's not much depth there. You're not going very deep into the information. Now, when you start understanding the item, then suddenly you can go into those questions. You can actually begin drawing from that well and sharing more information. When you're able to apply it, oh, suddenly you really have a nice deep well of information for that networking. You can now not only say, this is what my company does, and this is how we do it, but this is how it impacts. Oh, so suddenly you have a deeper well. So if the questions lead you further down the well, you're able to go there and you're able to successfully network. When you can analyze it, then suddenly you are really deep and you're really able to impress your audience and you can answer the questions and you can actually begin evaluating different products and you can begin to create solutions for the people you're talking to. So when you're doing that networking, always think about how deep is the well you're going in with. If that well isn't deep, you're not going to be able to network. The deeper the well is, the more networking you're going to be able to do and the more impressive it's going to be. What we want to talk about is what is a work group? Speaking for your vocation, such as at a keynote speaker, or speaking at work, such as a training. Additionally, we talked about networking and developing a well of information so that you can successfully network. Unity is strength. When there is teamwork and collaboration, wonderful things can be achieved. I think this is how all companies feel. If their work groups get along, they can really accomplish things. When you can't communicate within the work group and you can't network, you really are putting up barriers to success.